I'm Addison Brown, and this is the Emerging World Project podcast. What are you doing here?
Hey everyone, this is Mark. We have a fantastic show for you. Addison sat down with Madison, also known as Maddog, Maddog's honeybees. Yes, she manages the honeybees, but she's also sort of like a ghostbuster for bees. I missed the conversation because I had a bit of school to attend to. It's all good though, because we have lots more cool episodes coming up, and you can bet I am really interested in the things our guests will be sharing with us. And as usual, I have questions. Anyway, our guest on this episode is a California beekeeper. She studied English literature and practices martial arts, which I imagine is really helpful in managing all those bee colonies. You can learn a ton of interesting things in detail about her beehive community if you hit up her IG account. For now, enjoy this informative conversation. And remember, the bees will freak out if you do, so don't freak out. Alright then, I'll catch you later.
Hey there, thank you for joining us. As I record this, I am sitting at my desk facing west in the center of downtown Los Angeles. My eyes are searching for greenery, trees, rooftop gardens. I want to play with the contrast of the blueness of the sky and the dull-colored concrete skyscrapers. During early May of last year, I'd spent a lot of time looking out this window. I saw birds at all times of the day. A couple of mourning doves, of which I had never witnessed in this area before, visited my windowsill on 2 exact occasions. When I told a friend about this, she replied easily, "Those birds are somebody." I thought to myself, I actually do believe that now. But whom? My mother? My father? My beloved Jack Russell that transitioned almost 3 years ago? We are no doubt, in my mind, at play with that which we are, nature. One night, as I wrapped up my day and shut down the lights to begin my evening meditations, I sensed some buzzy little creature somewhere within my vision. I was not inclined to investigate and turned off the light. The next morning I got up early as the sun was just rising, reflecting off the skyscrapers and giving me a little bit of natural light. I'm not sure when I gained this sixth sense, or what seems like a sixth sense Hawkeye vision combination, but it is there, and I just go with it. As I wandered into the kitchen, I could see on the stark stone countertop the figure of an unmoving little bee. She seemed to be sleeping. I remembered reading somewhere that water or sweetened water may be needed. Okay. Admittedly, I knew very little about the life of bees before this incident. I put a drop of water in front of her. I got dressed, which now included putting on a mask. I gathered Little Bee up. She flapped her wings a little bit in my makeshift transport container, and I vowed to learn about her world as I deposited her in the flower beds in my courtyard. Everything is changing. And everyone is changing. At times it is confusing, terrifying, infuriating, heartbreaking, and completely out of control. But somehow, I just keep that blur in the front of my awareness, and it softens. Mostly, not sure of what is required, but whatever it is, I will, with all that I can offer, be there in generosity. Let's catch up with our guest, beekeeper, Madison Newman. Madison?
Hi, Addison.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. I just came back from working out, and so I'm ready to get to talking about bees.
Well, I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
I guess you've got I sent you a note that my lovely co-host Marley will be missing today.
Yes, unfortunately.
We'll catch up with him next time. He's
Okay.
rather inquisitive, and if we can find some time in your schedule, hopefully he'll pop in. We thought he was having a spring break, but somehow we got our dates wrong. So he's in school.
Oh, bummer.
Bummer.
Yeah.
So it's you and I.
Okay, no problem.
Fantastic. So I'm really happy that you're joining us. So thank you for doing that and taking the time out of your life to speak with us. So one of the things that I ask to start these conversations and get to know you a little bit is when did you first notice your relationship to the natural world?
Yeah, that's a great question. My mother was an outdoor enthusiast. She loved hiking. She loved exploring. She would get into her beat up, 1998 Honda Civic and just take to the back roads, whether that be off-roading or whatever. And if she got stuck, she got stuck. Such as life was kind of her go-to motto. So she was certainly very, very attached to nature. And so she kind of took my hand and led me to that from an early age. There are photographs of me, at Kern River with her when I was 2 years old, digging in the banks of the river or in the snow in Big Bear and all sorts of things. And when I was older, we would go to Santa Clarita to a place that was very dear to her called Placerita Canyon, and we would hike to the waterfall, and we would take the various trails that are found there. She loved a place called Templin Highway that oftentimes fills up with water around this time of year and is fed from, I believe it's Pyramid Lake. And so my mother was really the person who introduced me to the natural world. And specifically when I lost her in 2013, I was constantly seeking out some sort of connection to her. And to do so, I was just basically diving into nature head first. So I'm oftentimes hiking and exploring now, and it provides a certain connection, I think, to her. And she kind of instilled in me an adventurous spirit. And so, especially when I lost her, I really noticed that if I had a day off or I was off from school, I would be scheduling hikes with my friends or scheduling some types of explorations that we could go do or anything, any sort of thing to really put me into the trees or in the mountains or at a beach or in a river, anything. Yeah.
That's so amazingly beautiful and special. I would imagine that starting so early, that you don't ever feel disconnected from nature. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I guess when you think of Los Angeles and specifically like the San Fernando Valley, you wouldn't necessarily associate that kind of in a nature setting. However, we do have our hidden gems here and our perks, and we only have the Angeles National Forest. It's about like an hour and a half, 2 hour drive for me. So I will oftentimes go there because there are some really gorgeous hikes there. Malibu is filled with it, Camarillo. There are all sorts of things. Even in the San Fernando Valley, we have Chatsworth, which Chatsworth Mountains are a beautiful place to explore. So yes, even here, kind of in this urban setting, there are still ways that I find a way to forge a connection to the natural world.
I love that. And I often say that to my friends that comment that I live in downtown LA, but I spend most of my time out in nature on beaches and hikes. And I said, it's amazing because I can go from this urban city of this concrete, which is changing a little bit, and be, in some of the most exquisite environments right, within 30 minutes. So we're a little spoiled, aren't we?
I think we certainly are. I'm not sure if the weather is exactly my favorite thing in the world, which I think some people are shocked by. Maybe I would be singing a different tune though if I was, hit with 8 inches of snow in Minnesota or something like that. But sometimes it does get a little too hot for me here. But like you had just said, Los Angeles is a very diverse area where you can go to the beach to cool off, or if you wanted to get even colder, go ahead and take, an hour and a half drive up to Mount Baldy or anything like that.
Right.
And you're in the snow. So we are,
right.
we are a bit spoiled here. I would agree.
I remember when my nephew was very young and he came to visit, maybe it was about the third or fourth time that he came to Los Angeles to visit. And he said to me, Auntie, how come Los Angeles only has one weather?
Yes. Yeah, we
didn't go into any adventures. I suspect we were just at the beach all the time.
Yes, we have one of my coworkers right now. She is actually from Minnesota, which is probably why I used that example prior. And so she's a transplant here to LA, and she's like, "Well, it looks like we're out of winter and we're in spring now." And this was a couple months back, and I said, "This is fake spring, false spring. Then we'll jump back into a semi-winter potentially. Then we'll probably hit summer again some way along the way, which we're kind of in summer right now with this very hot 89 degree weather that we have here in the Valley. And then we'll go back to cooler temps, mid-April, back down to the high 60s, back into a milder spring." So, once there's a LA, it's hard to keep track of or anticipate what day you're going to have here. Yeah.
Right. I've heard it called, what was the expression? Bipolar.
Yes. You can never know really how to dress here, because you might go to the beach in a tank and then you need an overcoat by night because it gets pretty chilly. So, yeah.
Right. On the beach with your Uggs.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's a very LA thing. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if there were those who went out to the beach with their Uggs. That wouldn't surprise me here.
Oh my goodness. It's so funny.
It's really beautiful to hear how much of an impact your mother had on you with regards to the natural world. Who else would you say influences you?
Yeah, that I'm very blessed in the sense that I have a lot of people in my life whom I treasure and cherish, and every single one of them influences me in different respects in my life. For example, I have a boyfriend named Jared. He's wildly creative, filmmaker type, and so he is constantly challenging me when we are watching film or engaging in television or anything like that. So he challenges me and influences me in a creative aspect of my life. And my mother obviously ushered me into more respect for nature and the environment. But to pick somebody, I guess, in terms of beekeeping, it would probably be my mentor, Keith Roberts. He is a wonderful gentleman. He's a very diligent man, very headstrong, very intelligent, and he was the one who has has taken my hand and led me through beekeeping. So I would say in terms of beekeeping and in other aspects of my life, he is probably one of the biggest influences. He's introduced me to things that I love now, like martial arts or beer brewing, and most importantly, beekeeping. So I would probably say that he is probably one of the biggest influences in my life right now.
Now, would you say that he chose you or you chose him?
I don't know in the hiring process, I was interviewed by another lovely and diligent woman named Robin, and she is one of the bosses at the Valley Hive, which is where I currently work and do a lot of my main beekeeping work. And then Keith, I was just hired to sell honey. And that's all I was supposed to be doing, was selling honey. That's it. I actually, when I first started out, was terrified of bees. I was extremely afraid of them. I wanted nothing to do with them whatsoever. So I was content just selling honey. A couple months down the line, I went to their main shop, because when I sold honey, I was selling it at the mall. They had this tiny cart, but they had a main shop in Chatsworth on Baden Avenue where they would sell beekeeping supplies, tools, hold their beekeeping classes. And there was one instance where one day they allowed me, when they were doing their package pickup. A package is basically a box of bees, about 10,000 bees with a queen, and they sell them to people. And that's how people here in Los Angeles will get started with their beekeeping ventures, is either through packages or something else that we sell called nukes. But basically, I was lucky enough to be asked to help out on package day, and it was my first time in a bee suit, and I was just completely and utterly enamored. All of those fears that I had held had melted away. And watching Keith, he's not wearing anything. He was just handing out packages of bees with a few stragglers flying around and brushing off bees, no suit, nothing at all, no gloves, no veil. And he was just utterly zen. And I was awestruck by that. And then there was nothing else that I wanted to do except have the opportunity to get into these colonies. So when you ask like who chose who, I was hired by them, but then I latched on to Keith immensely and was practically begging him day after day after day to say, hey, I want to get into the hives with you. I want to, clean up wax with you. I want to help you extract honey. Anything that I can do, I want to do that if it's related to bee work. And so I had reduced myself to a broken record of sorts, and every day I was just constantly pleading with him, like, take me into the bees, take me into the bees. So if anything, I kind of forced myself upon him to make him take me under his wing.
That sounds so amazing. One thing that I'm hearing, and I love this, was that your fear just dissipated. And you remember that moment?
We have these preconceived notions of bees that obviously one of the big ticket facts that people know about them is they have stingers, right? And that can be scary, absolutely. But, the bees are not exactly concerned with stinging us unless they have a viable reason to do so, usually. And so when we're handing out packages or nukes of bees and selling them to the public, they are a certain type of honeybee called Italian honeybees. They're very sweet, gentle, kind, phenomenal honey producers. They do well in this type of climate. And so watching him have no reservations with, picking up a frame of bees. You'll see people picking up frames. That's where the bees build out their comb. The queen lays their eggs. They have babies and pollen and honey. And those are what you see inside of hive boxes. Watching him pick up a frame with absolutely no gloves and opening up a hive with a smoker and just maybe having a veil on in the spring. And, he's moving the frame around. He's moving frames inside of the boxes, and he's not getting stung whatsoever. So I think what really stuck with me is that, the bees will give to you what you give to them. If you're very skittish and you're very concerned around them, you're making clumsy movements out of your fear and anxiety, like maybe you drop a frame or you're squishing bees when you put that frame back in because you're not concerned, you're more so concerned with getting stung than anything else, then yeah, you're gonna squish some bees, which will release some alarm pheromone, and then some bees, may start getting a bit antsy and trying to sting you. But overall, if you are calm, cool, and collected and are acting so around them inside the colony, using smoke appropriately, you can walk away from a colony without, ever being stung. And that depends on the genetics. Like I said, we're talking about Italian honeybees here, but so that really made an impact on me. Just how magnificent he maneuvered himself in these hives and alongside these bees, as if he was one of them. Like when I worked with Keith or when he teaches students and I watch him, he says Tai Chi speed. We're moving Tai Chi speed. And that's exactly what you have to do. So that was something that made a big impact on me, was never, he was rarely getting stung when I would watch him work.
It makes sense that Tai Chi, that you would put those two together. There's a certain energy that has to be focused and used while you're processing. So, which brings me to, we can now start talking about these honeybees and what, maybe bees in general, what is their function in our world?
That's a great question. So When you're out in nature and you're observing honeybees on flowers, what you are seeing is you are seeing the oldest worker bees in the colony. Now, all worker bees are female. There are no male worker bees. The worker bees are the ones who have the stingers, and as their name implies, they perform all of the tasks and duties within the colony, such as being nurse bees and tending to young larvae, feeding them, regulating temperature. They can be cleaner bees, cleaning out the cells in their colony, an attendant to the queen, making sure that she is fed, that her waste is removed, etc. And they typically live about 4 to 6 weeks. And so the last couple weeks of their life is spent outside foraging. And so when you're outside, you're specifically seeing forager bees, who are the oldest worker bees in the hive. And what they're doing is they're collecting either nectar, pollen, or water, all things that are necessary for them to bring back to the colony for proper brood rearing, to regulate temperature, to make sure that no starvation ensues, and so on. And so while they're doing that and they're collecting nectar and pollen on the flowers, they'll basically create, little pollen baskets on the backs of their legs. And they will also get pollen sometimes on their body, but primarily they're very organized and they're very good at getting it packed on the backs of their legs. But when they do travel to another flower, they will bring pollen from that prior flower to this new one, which results in pollination. So how they relate to our world and something that they do for us is they are major pollinators. And so they will be in your garden and you'll notice that, oh, they're visiting my avocado tree, and look, my avocado tree is doing better than ever because I have all these bees visiting it, or my orange trees or apple trees and so on, because they are such major pollinators for so many different types of crops. So they're major pollinators in our world, and they provide us with, the lovely world that we live in now.
That's beautiful.
So naturally, I have to ask you about the queen bee.
She's very fascinating, absolutely. And so if you ever come to the Valley Hive, we have a shop in Chatsworth and we have an observation hive, and you can stop by and you can see bees behind glass. So you can actually see a fully operational hive where the bees are coming and going with a tube that leads outside, so they're not trapped inside. So you can actually see the inner workings of a colony without having to don a suit or light a smoke or anything. And the first question that everybody asks us when we open it up is, where's the queen? And that's a great question. It's difficult to find, a single bee in a hive that could get anywhere between, 15 to 20,000 bees in this observation hive that we have. And so the queen bee, her role is she is the reproductive female of the colony. So she is not a worker bee in the sense that she's going out and collecting food or regulating temperature or taking care of babies, building wax, guarding the hive. Her job is to lay eggs. And so right now in the spring and the summer, she can lay anywhere between 1,500 to 2,000 eggs a day. She can choose whether to lay male or female. If she lays a fertilized egg, it becomes a worker bee. If she lays an unfertilized egg, it will become a male drone bee. And so she is the reproductive female of the colony. She is laying the entire population of the hive. There are not 2 queens in a hive or 3 or 4. There is only one queen at a time. When there are multiple queens within a hive, they will fight to the death. There are rare instances that you can read about in bee journals where a mother queen and a daughter queen have coexisted. But typically, when we're talking about queens, there's only one queen in a colony. If there's another one, they will fight to the death. And the queen bee does not do any other work aside from that. So laying eggs is her main role. She has a smooth stinger. So when worker bees sting, something that people also know is that they die because worker bees have barbed stingers. They have these little barbs that will hook into our mammal-like skin. And so when they pull out, it'll rip out their digestive tract and intestines, and so they'll die. But the queen bee, she has a smooth stinger, so she can choose to sting as many times as she likes, but she typically reserves that stinger for other queen bees if she needs to throw hands and, keep her throne.
So there's a lot of discussion about the practices of collecting honey amongst vegans and the plant-based community. Can you explain to us what they're referring to, and what are your thoughts about it?
When I see people talking about, well, I don't want to eat honey because, beekeepers are very harsh on the colonies, or they use improper practices or things like that. Oftentimes, they'll refer to an outdated practice that nobody that I know in our beekeeping circle and beyond, or at conventions or in bee journals or anything like that, are practicing. But it's basically what some people will refer to is the clipping of the queen's wings, that beekeepers will maliciously grab the queen and cut her wings so that she has no way of flying and leaving, because bees will do this thing called swarming. And so swarming is where 2/3 of the colony will leave with the original queen. And so you're losing a big chunk of your workforce. So, it's not ideal, but it is in the genetic code of the bees. It is in their nature to swarm, one, to propagate the species, and two, if they don't have enough space in the hive, then they'll swarm as well as a way to lessen the population in that hive that can't sustain what they had built out to. But nobody is clipping the wings that I'm aware of. Clipping the wings is detrimental to a honeybee hive, which any experienced beekeeper is aware of. If you're clipping the queen's wings, the bees will recognize this and they will eject her. They will kill her. If there's anything slightly wrong with the queen that could potentially inhibit her from performing her job correctly, the bees will understand this. And so nobody that I am aware of is clipping wings. So that's something that sometimes people will reference when they're talking about, beekeepers practicing some malicious practices on their honeybees. But nobody in our circle or beyond, as I've said, like speaking at conventions or reading beekeeping journals, are practicing anything like that. And what I was talking about before in terms of what you give to the honeybees, you will get back. And so we are never taking honey from the bees above a certain box. And so we always leave our hives with enough honey to thrive in the fall and the winter. And so with our beekeeping students here in Southern California, it's different in other parts of the United States. But since, we were talking about how the weather here is very strange, how we don't really have a full-on winter, we still make sure that beekeepers never take honey from the first box, which is their deep hive body, or their second box, which is their medium hive body. And that medium hive body becomes a honey reserve box in the fall and winter. They'll convert it from a brood rearing box, meaning a box that contains babies in the spring and the summer, to a honey box for the fall and winter, so that they have some reserves, like a bank account that they can pull out from when they get hungry. And so we make sure that that medium box, which can contain about 35 to 45 pounds of honey, depending on how fat the comb is built out and how filled out it is left solely for the bees. So we always teach people that you can't take honey prematurely from a colony. It's very important that they have what they need to survive the fall and winter. We only take honey responsibly from what we call supers, and supers are above the medium hive bodies. There's still a medium hive body, but all medium hive bodies are basically all supers are medium hive bodies, but not all medium hive bodies are supers. And that's just to say that certain medium hive bodies that we have are designated for honey collection. And so from the third box on, that's when we can responsibly take honey from a colony. So if I see that a hive is struggling or starving or hasn't reached that point and they've only made a medium box of honey for themselves, the nectar flow is over, the season is done, I will not take that honey from that hive because I do not want to further stress them out. So if we treat our hives properly, then we can potentially get a higher honey yield. But I won't get anywhere if I'm starving my colonies in the fall and the winter. And so we always make sure that we leave them enough honey to thrive, which I think is another misconception, that we're going in there and taking whatever drop they produce for ourselves greedily. But we make sure that we're only taking honey when they have built out an abundance of it inside their hive.
When we're talking about climate change, and you hear a lot of talk about the disappearance of bees and how it's important that obviously doesn't happen. How is it happening? Is that true?
Sometimes in the media, you'll hear something referred to as colony collapse disorder, where, a hive may have been doing really well a couple weeks ago, and then a beekeeper will return to it and all of them are gone. And there's nobody left in the box. And so there's many things that are out to get the honeybee. And that includes, one, yes, climate change. When we don't get sufficient rainfall, it is going to be a much more difficult nutritional season for the bees. They need rainfall. We need cooler and more mild temperatures. Having a February where we're getting already 90-degree temperatures, which are causing things to bloom early, and maybe the bees haven't revved up enough and they're not built out enough to take advantage of that, or where we're getting days where it's 110 degrees, 4 days in a row. That is not doing the honeybee any favors, but rainfall significantly impacts how honeybees perform. And so if there is not a lot of food out there and it is a weak nectar flow, it's going to be very difficult for them, because nutrition is very, very important when it comes to dealing with honeybee colonies. Additionally, on top of climate change, there are things like planting maybe just monocultures. So monocultures are basically these fields and fields where they're just producing one crop. And that is not good for honeybees or any other native pollinators for that matter, because they need a varied diet. And so just like how you and I could not subsist off of simply just eating like candy, or maybe just eating an apple every day and that's it. The bees need a varied diet, so it's really important to have things like polycultures where there's different types of crops about. Also with monocultures, certain things like almonds, they only bloom a certain time during the year. So if you've dedicated, miles and miles to this one type of crop, once that season is over, those couple months where they were blooming has ended, then there goes a large section of food that was sustaining maybe native pollinators in that area as well. So monocultures are something that are detrimental to honeybee hives. Basically urban infringement on our part. So it seems like, especially in Los Angeles, or even where I live, if we have an empty plot of land, what are we doing with it? We're just building condos or apartment complexes or things like that. While it probably would be beneficial to have more community gardens or areas that are designated, pollinator areas, or we could get creative like other places like in Europe. There's these neat things where even at bus stops, they're taking advantage of every little bit of space. And so on top of the bus stop, they're actually planting pollinator-friendly flowers to help, provide more food for honeybees. So urban infringement on our part. And then there are pests and pathogens that are against the honeybee as well. There is something called a varroa mite, and a varroa mite is basically this tiny little fat eater that latches on to the honeybees and will consume their fat stores, but it also has 26 transmittable viruses. And so that is a large plight for the beekeeper. They can completely and utterly wipe out a colony if action is not taken against them. So varroa mites, so pest pathogens, and then of course pesticides. Honeybees, they can travel 3 to 5 miles to collect nectar, pollen, or water. And so within a 3 to 5 mile radius, if the golf course is being sprayed, or, the dentist office wants to keep, the plants that they have outside looking very nice for the public, and they're spraying, or maybe a neighbor is spraying in their backyard, honeybees are susceptible to get into any of these, and pesticides can completely wipe out colonies as well. So overall, there's a lot. Climate change, monocultures, urban infringement on our part, pests and pathogens, and pesticides.
Are you involved in any organizations that are looking at all of these elements?
What we do at the Valley Hive every year, with COVID, obviously it's changed a little bit, but typically every year we're doing a honey competition. And at this honey competition, we have all of our beekeeping students, or even if they're not working, have come to classes at our place or anything like that. If they just keep beehives and they produce, maybe they got some honey, we do a honey competition where everybody can bring their honey. We sell raffle tickets to raffle off some of it. We'll do like a dunk tank. We'll have vendors there. We'll sell food. We'll do food competitions made with honey. And it's basically this large fundraising event where we take the proceeds and we donate them to a place called Be Informed. And Be Informed does exactly what you were asking, where they're analyzing all of the detriments that the honeybees are facing now and other pollinators, and how we can go about as a society working towards saving honeybees and other native pollinators as well. So we've done that in the past. So Be Informed is a great website for people who are looking to learn more about honeybees and what they're facing right now.
Oh, that's fantastic. We'll make sure to put that URL in our notes. So I have a couple of questions that somewhat are off the busy bee life. What I noticed that you studied English literature.
In English literature, we're taught to be, very analytical and have impeccable critical thinking skills, critical reasoning skills. And I use those very same skills when I'm inspecting colonies. And so before I even enter a beehive colony, my inspection is well underway. So I am analyzing, well, how tall is the grass right now? Do I see any ants that are walking up the stand? Do I see any dead bees surrounding the colony? Oh, I do. Let me look at this bee closer. Let me inspect this bee. Is her proboscis, her tongue sticking out? If so, maybe there was a pesticide hit. Analyzing the weather even before I get into my colonies can give me an idea as to what I may find. Oh, it's, we're in the middle of December and we had a very rainy week, which means no flying for the bees whatsoever. I know that I need to bring sugar syrup probably with me to supplement, some of their food and give them a boost nutritionally. When I open up a hive, I'm scanning all of the bees individually, and I'm gliding across the frame, and I'm looking at it and thinking, do I see any instances of deformed wing virus? That's a virus that the varroa mite transmits. Do I see any varroa mites attached to the honeybees? Those are what we call phoretic mites. Do I see a lot of tattered wings in general? Do I see comb that was ripped up? Do I see comb that's ripped up at the bottom? Maybe there was a robbing event. How much pollen are they bringing in? Are they bringing in fresh nectar yet? Do I see fresh white wax? So my job does require me to be very analytical, and so I think my English literature degree has definitely lent itself to that in my beekeeping career thus far.
We are talking to Maddog. She's a beekeeper from California. We're going to take a break. We will be back in a moment. Okay, so can you take us through, let's just say I called you and I'm panicking because I think that there is a beehive living within the walls of my hot tub. So, what do we do?
I will say it's very difficult to gain information to say positively right then and there, like, oh, yes, you do 100% have a hive inside of something. With swarms, it's a much easier to tell and gather that information over the phone because swarms are large masses of bees that will collect like a basketball or a football on a tree. And so they'll say, like, I have this really, really big clump of bees on a tree. And I'll say, yes, that's a swarm. But like, for example, this time of year, especially springtime, you'll be noticing there's a lot more bee activity in general because nectar sources are opening up, colonies are increasing their population, and foragers are going out and finding food. So sometimes I'll have people call me and say, like, oh, I definitely have a hive inside of my tree. And I say, well, do you see bees purposefully, darting in and out, coming back with pollen inside? Do you see maybe some comb that's built out on the inside? And it's like, no, I just have a lot of bees visiting my tree right now. And that's just foraging activity. So if somebody gives me a call, I have to ask them a few questions like, well, when did you start noticing this activity? Do you see them coming and going? Because foragers, they zoom out of the colony, and when they return, they'll be laden down with either nectar or pollen. So they kind of hover a little bit and then enter inside. So if you see bees coming and going from like a crack or a crevice or a hole or something like that, that's usually a pretty good indication that there might be a colony there. Something that we provide as well is we'll come out and provide a free estimate. So depending on, how far the person is, we'll say, okay, well, let me come out to be certain, and then I can provide you with an estimate because beehive removals are a lengthy process and they can be very difficult. And so when we do come out, I'll say, okay, well, this will take me maybe an hour, so I'll charge, maybe $250. Or, oh, this is a swarm. It's, an easier collection process than what it is to do, an established colony. So an established colony is when they've been there for a while longer. They have built out blades of comb that I must take a specialized knife and cut out the comb precisely and orient it the exact same way in frames and rubber band and nail, either gently vacuuming up the bees or scooping them with my hand, depending on, how easily accessible they are, whether it be in a jacuzzi or deep inside a wall or in a roof. They can be anywhere. But a swarm capturing is a little bit easier because they're all right there. No comb has been built out, and I can, gently either cut the branch off and set it inside of a hive body, or maybe they're covering multiple branches and I can start scooping them with my hands, or I can shake them gently into a box as well. So yeah, that's kind of what it's like when somebody gives me a call, is I try to gather as much information as I can initially, and then we come out and we provide estimates, and then we get to work after we find a day that will be suitable, because you can't just remove a colony, an established colony, like when it's raining or really cold, because the honeybee hive needs to stay 94 to 96 degrees at all times. That's what the temperature that they maintain within a colony by vibrating their flight muscles, so that none of the babies, the brood, chills. And so typically I'm looking for, sunnier, warmer days to do established hive removals. So yeah, depending on the vicinity to the removal, will determine, where I will move those bees to. So yeah, I'll take them to one of our yards, or if I'm doing like maybe a small removal under like my little side hustle where I maintain a few colonies and produce honey and lip balms, etc. And sometimes people who I know personally will say, hey, Madison, I have bees like in a water meter, and that's a relatively easy fix. Then I'll remove those bees and move them onto one of my plots where I keep bees. Established businesses, they're doing it not saying that hobbyists aren't, but they're doing it a specific way that is proven true, and these are professionals, and we're doing it this way because we know it will ensure the survival of the colonies, keeping the public safe and things like that.
I have to tell you that I really appreciate your attention to detail, the thoroughness of it.
Thank you.
I can feel it in your soul, that it feels like something that is part of your purpose. Just listening to the whole process, even though it seems complex, it's complex for that reason, because it's part of a whole system.
Yes, right? It can be very frustrating. Sometimes it can be confusing. Any beekeeper who tells you, you know, I know this for certain, or this will always be this way, or 100% this, that, etc., is probably lying to you. So they've told you one lie, they'll tell you another. You will be learning beekeeping until, you know, the day you die, or the day that you stop beekeeping, or whatever. It is a learning process.
Right.
So I don't always have all the answers. And bees, you know, they're wild animals, and they don't always do what I will anticipate them to do, or what the books may say they might do. So yes, it's very complicated, but like I said, it is an amazing thing to pursue as well. But people need to, if they're going to take on the responsibility of, you know, keeping beehives in their backyard or anything of the sort, they need to be prepared for that, because that's exactly what it is it is a responsibility. It's not like, you know, getting a pet rock, which I think some people might equate it with, like, well, can I just put the bees in my backyard and let them do their thing? Right. Well, if you let them do their thing, there's, you know, there's many different, there's many different things that could happen. They could die because they starve because you're not inspecting them, or they could die because varroa mites, the varroa mite levels got such heights that the colony collapsed. Or here in Los Angeles, you know, Africanized honeybees were created in the 1960s, and they were splicing together Italian honeybees and African honeybees to create a honeybee who is very resilient to disease, but really great, phenomenal honey producers. And what happened was they created very violent and aggressive bees, and then 16 swarms were accidentally released. Whoa. And those swarms were making their way up through South America, and now we have them in the southern region of the United States. And so when you go and gather a swarm, or you get an established colony that you don't know the genetics of, you need to be prepared for that as well. So it's not always very simple. They're not something to just, you know, like a goldfish, to just buy it on a whim and keep it in your bedroom and kind of hope it survives, because there's things that can happen. Like if you're not checking your colony regularly, you know, that hive could become Africanized, and they could pose a danger to the public. So it's very important that people are cognizant and aware of the responsibility that beekeeping poses. Not to discourage people. People should definitely jump into it. Like, you don't need to have all the qualities of a beekeeper immediately, because I sure didn't. I was afraid of bees. I ran away from them whenever they approached me. But by putting the work in and reading about them and educating myself and doing my due diligence, that's where I've gotten, you know, that's how I've gotten to this point today.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So before we wrap this up, it's wonderful to talk to you. What do you hope to take away and share with others?
I just hope to share with people the fact that pollinators in general are in danger. They're vital to our way of life, especially not only to our ecosystem, but our agricultural system and technically our economy. Honeybees produce roughly $20 billion in crops for us. They pollinate everything from alfalfa, apples, oranges, avocados, you know, you name it, gooseberries, cranberries, blueberries, almonds. So there's so much food that we would be without, you know, beehive colonies pollinating them. So it's very important to understand how vital they are to our way of life right now. And so even if somebody's just, reading a blog post on honeybees or maybe watching a little documentary on them, it's important to educate yourself where we stand with these pollinators right now. And I would also like to express it's not just the honeybee either. There's native pollinators like mason bees and leafcutter bees and bumblebees, carpenter bees, so many different types of bees who also suffer due to the things that I had described before, like climate change or improper nutrition, pesticides, urban infringement. All of those can also affect those types of pollinators. And those pollinators, as their name would imply again, they also pollinate. So I would just like to express to the public, and from my experiences beekeeping, that even if you don't want to be a beekeeper, which is completely fine, some people are wired correctly and they do not want to surround themselves with thousands of stinging insects on a daily basis. So beekeeping itself may not be for everybody, but learning about the situation that we are in right now with our pollinators and what they do contribute to our society, I think is very important. And you don't need to put on a bee suit or buy a beehive to do that.
Yes, agreed. Thank you so much for sharing that vital information with us. Okay, as we round the corner here, I have one request for you, and that is, could you please tell us a funny story? Some funny happenings in the world of bees?
I will say that most of my experiences that I later on find funny, I do not find funny in that moment. Like, for example, when I show up to places in my own vehicle, I drive a beat up 2003 Toyota Corolla, which is not a beekeeping car. So if you're interested in pursuing beekeeping full time, don't drive that car. Get something that can handle boxes of honey, like a truck. Have a truck, get a truck, please. I beg of you, have a truck on hand. It's much more feasible to be a beekeeper with a truck. And so, like, something funny that's in my car is like nobody wants to sit in my back seat because they're frankly disgusted by it. There is honey like all over my floors in the backseat of my car from gathering supers, and maybe some burr comb broke and some honey got everywhere, or occasionally maybe there's bees in my car that nobody wants to get into, because if I moved bees, if I had a truck, I wouldn't have to worry about it. But in my car, bees can get trapped inside, and I'll try to usher them out. So sometimes there's a rogue bee inside my car that people are afraid to get in my car. There's propolis in my back seat. So every time I approach my Toyota, it's pleading for death, a sweet release. It is definitely not a beekeeping car. So I guess that's kind of funny. Like, every time I get in my car, like, something's sticky or something's wrong. Yeah, something's wrong with it. Or, like, for example, I brought my car in the other day, and this guy was working on, changing my oil or something, and he was moving it, and he was like, "It smells like barbecue in here." And I was like, "Oh, thank you. It's not barbecue. It's actually a lit smoker, that I'm currently putting out in the trunk of my car that is wafting into the rest of my car." So, yeah, I would probably say something that's pretty funny is the current status of my poor car, as it relates to beekeeping.
That's brilliant.
I can't tell you how often, like in the past, like hugging somebody or like shaking their hand, they're like, "You kind of smell like smoked meats." And I'm like, that's not really what like I want to hear as a young woman. I don't really want to hear somebody saying that I smell like smoked meats, but that's what a smoker oftentimes makes you smell like. And it's hard to get off of you. When I pick up a frame of bees, it's really hard to focus on any other worry or trouble that I'm currently experiencing in my life. Beekeeping has certainly helped to strengthen my personality and help me forge the personality that I have today.
Yeah, I love that idea, because obviously people learn differently, but I think we're also beginning to discover and reconnect, I should say too, with our place in nature. And when you hear stories about the queen bee and just how the colonies work, we see that in our own lives.
Yeah.
I have one more question, then I'm gonna let you go. Do you have a book that you could recommend?
A book that we typically recommend for first-year students, people who just walk into the shop, bought a jar of honey, a beehive boxes caught their eye and they were like, hey, I want to get into this. What should I read? I would recommend The Backyard Beekeeper, the 4th edition by a gentleman named Kim Flodham. And it goes through everything that you need to know about like honeybee biology, navigating your first year in beekeeping, how honey is made, the other gifts that we can get from the hive, like propolis and beeswax and pollen and royal jelly and so many other things. So that is a really good beginner book that I think anybody could really read, 12 and up as well.
Awesome. I had a listener ask me about that because she was anxious to have her granddaughter listen to our conversation.
I'll let you know what we just got in, because I know we do have some books that are more so geared towards, educating younger people. And so I will look into that, and I'll just send you a few, and maybe you can put them up alongside this podcast.
Well, Madison, I've been speaking with you for a little over an hour, and you hardly seem very menacing. So tell us how you got the nickname Maddog.
I'm not initially, very menacing, but I definitely have a stare to me. And like I said, I do practice martial arts in my spare time. And another thing about beekeeping, it is not easy lifting. A box filled with honey can weigh up to about 50 to 60 pounds. So I'm pulling, hundreds of those at a time. So I've got some muscle to me, not to flex right now, I guess literally, but I do. And so I guess sometimes people will say, like, you just kind of have this mad dog stare. Sometimes I'm lost in thought, or I'm thinking about something, or maybe somebody is making me angry, and I've been told that I kind of have a look to me. So, and my name is Madison, so I guess it just kind of flows. Mad Dogs, Honeybees.
There you go. Well, Mad Dogs, Honeybees, it has been an absolute delight speaking with you.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
Wonderful. Thank you,
Bye.
Madison.
All right. Thanks for hanging out with us. We have only a couple of requests. That is to hit us up on the website, emergingworldproject.org, where you can dig a little bit deeper into our conversations. And remember, friends, be the light in the room.
I'm not initially, very menacing, but I definitely have a stare to me. And like I said, I do practice martial arts in my spare time. And another thing about beekeeping, it is not easy lifting. A box filled with honey can weigh up to about 50 to 60 pounds. So I'm pulling, hundreds of those at a time. So I've got some muscle to me, not to flex right now, I guess literally, but I do. And so I guess sometimes people will say, like, you just kind of have this mad dog stare. Sometimes I'm lost in thought, or I'm thinking about something, or maybe somebody is making me angry, and I've been told that I kind of have a look to me. So, and my name is Madison, so I guess it just kind of flows. Mad Dogs, Honeybees.
There you go. Well, Mad Dogs, Honeybees, it has been an absolute delight speaking with you.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
Wonderful. Thank you,
Bye.
Madison.